Hello everyone, this is going to be part 3 of your Obamanomics help video or Obamanomics help video. And so we've developed this tool. We've used game theory before to help us describe or understand the behavior of oligopolistic firms. And we've in particular used a type of game, the prisoner's dilemma, to help us think about sort of the incentives that exist in an oligopolistic market. We can also use game theory to help us describe the behavior of political actors in society. And so at the beginning of your essay, right, so kind of towards this part right here, it talks about some long-standing and concerning demographic trends in the United States, specifically the fact that in the United States we have a larger percentage of our population is becoming elderly and are becoming eligible for a variety of social programs like Social Security and Medicare, and therefore putting increased fiscal strain on the state, right? So these trends are long-standing. They're concerning trends. Obviously, the United States hasn't run or not obviously, but the United States hasn't run a budget surplus, not just because of these social programs, but a variety of different ways in which the government spends money. The government hasn't run a budget surplus since the 90s, since Georgetown graduate Bill Clinton was president. But we can think about not just why, or we can think about the reasons, right, that are alluded in the piece, right? That's the whole objective of what we're doing in this assignment, is to translate the prose into graphs, right? Because graphs and models, and so this is a game-theoretic model, because they can tell us very sophisticated stories in very succinct and surprisingly accessible ways, right? So right here I have with us a prisoner's dilemma, a type of game, and we can think about, sort of the strategies that both Democrats and Republicans in our system have available to them to address the long-standing major issues that exist in this country. And I would imagine you can also probably similarly use a prisoner's dilemma to think of sort of the passivity of perhaps both parties to other issues, not just the fiscal situation in the United States. But here we have two strategies. Remember, that's how we show games in our class. Two strategies, active and passive. And Republicans have active and passive. And active, I mean actively address the situation. And obviously there are political incentives at play. Ways that you can actively address the situation are, dramatic overhauls to social programs that are very popular. People don't like change, so even if these dramatic overhauls includes maybe, people still get to keep sort of their healthcare benefits, but dramatic overhauls to the healthcare system and the healthcare market, people may still be discontent, right? But it could also include spending cuts or raising of taxes. And as a political party, you don't want to do that, right? You're politically disincentivized to do that. And so we can think of this as sort of a prisoner's dilemma, right? So Democrats could choose to be active or passive, Republicans could choose to be active or passive. Right, and so remember the role player, the payoffs the first number reflects the payoffs of the role player, contingent of course upon the strategy of the column player, right? Because strategic situations, our payoffs depend not only on our own actions, but the actions of someone else. And so here, the numbers, I should say, don't represent like utils. We're trying to minimize the numbers because the numbers actually represent the ranking system that Democrats and Republicans respectively ascribe to particular outcomes along this payoff matrix, right? So Democrats would prefer a situation in which they are passive about the fiscal situation in the United States, and Republicans are actively trying to address it as a political party, maybe once Republicans are in power. That would be the best case scenario for Democrats, and that is reflected in this idea that they value the scenario as being the best case, right, one, and incidentally, it's the worst case scenario for Republicans. And then the flipped logic for Republicans being passive and Democrats being active. And then finally, this box right here, where they're both actively taking and internalizing the political costs associated with, trying to sort of right the fiscal ship in the United States. Both of it see it as the second best option. And then the third best option, or the second worst option for both of these political parties is this square here. All right, and so the way that we solve games in this class is we look for dominant strategies, or strategies. A dominant strategy for Democrats would be so if passive is going to be the dominant. I'll give you a spoiler alert. Passive is going to be the dominant strategy. It's a dominant strategy if the payoffs from that dominant strategy are better, are strictly better than the payoffs that from the active strategy Democrats could play, irrespective of whatever Republicans do, right? And so we look for dominant strategies because as long as we have one, we can solve the game, because we assume that that player is going to play their dominant strategy and the other player is just going to play the best response to the dominant strategy, and we arrive at a solution, right? And so the way we can find it is we can hold Republican strategy constant, right, and ask ourselves what is Democrats' best option, assuming that Republicans are going to actively try to rectify or right the fiscal ship. Well, Democrats, obviously, their best option is to be passive, right? They're the calm player. It's to, let Republicans internalize that political cost. And then what if Republicans are passive? What would be the best strategy? Well, 3 is less than 4, so it's right here. And then we can see right here we arrived at a dominant strategy, right? This strategy is strictly, the payoffs from this associated with this strategy are strictly greater than the payoffs associated with this strategy. And then we can do the same, and if we can come up with a dominant strategy solution to this game, and we'll find that Republicans also have a dominant strategy that is passive, and then we'll end up with a dominant strategy solution. This dominant strategy solution is also a Nash equilibrium, right? It's a type of solution concept. A Nash equilibrium is a point at which both players are playing the best response to the other player, and so if the other player's strategy is held constant, they have #no regrets. Right? So we can think about it as, well, are Dems upset that they played this strategy? Are they really going to wish that they had played the active strategy instead? Well, if we hold Republican strategy constant, no, right? Because that would be the fourth worst outcome for them, or that would be the worst outcome for them. That would be the worst outcome for them, right? The column players right here. That would be the worst outcome for them. That's what they rank the worst outcome. So obviously they have no regrets, and we can do the same logic, right? Anywhere else, at this active situation, there's always going to be this incentive to deviate. So we can imagine if this is an iterative game or played over multiple times, that incentive to deviate might pull these players towards this Nash equilibrium. Now, of course, we can get around this prisoner's dilemma. There's ways to solve this prisoner's dilemma. And the prisoner's dilemma basically tells us a story of two players pursuing rational decisions, but acting rationally, but ending up at suboptimal outcomes. There are ways to solve prisoner's dilemmas through contracts, through changing the payoffs associated with these things. There are ways. It's just difficult at times. And so our goal, however, is to try to think about the way in which Obama interprets these tools and devices, right? And so I think Obama, is pretty clearly articulates that he wants to raise taxes, not on everyone, right? Which is probably what is needed, or dramatic spending cuts to kind of right the fiscal ship, but raise taxes on the richest Americans. And actually cut taxes, and he ended up doing that because we were in a financial crisis too, so there's like a macroeconomic argument why you would want to cut taxes on everyone else. Right, so Obama is, or perhaps sees this game, right, sees the fiscal situation and the unsustainability of this fiscal situation, but in some sense tries to kick the can down the road, right? That's how he might interpret this graph. He might see himself as, an actor that is, bound to end up in this equilibrium, right? He doesn't want to necessarily internalize, doesn't want political costs associated with raising taxes or cutting spending. So, and then how does this relate to Lionheart's thesis? Well, we can think about tax cuts. What's interesting too is, Obama does cut taxes, which is kind of seen as like the Republican orthodoxy, right? Democrats are kind of caricatured, especially in the age before Obama, as people that like high taxes and like to spend on a lot of programs. But Obama does cut taxes, right? Not on the wealthiest Americans, or he at least tries not to cut taxes on the wealthiest Americans. We can talk about the estate tax in the Obama era next week, but that's besides the point. But we can say, in some sense, it kind of does, show, right? He's trying to use the tax system to redistribute wealth, right? As the article was arguing, to kind of tackle income inequality by raising taxes on the wealthiest Americans. But at the same time, too, by cutting taxes on everyone else, he's kind of really adopting these popular conservative ideas and doesn't seem too concerned with the budget deficit, as, of course, Clinton seemed to be preoccupied with.